What's going on, folks? This is the East Village Times podcast. We are trying a new formula. Nick Lee is with me this week, potentially next week. I don't know. We'll see. Nick has written for the show, written for the site for 10 years. It's just been long overdue. So what's up, Nick? How are you doing, man?
Feels great to be here. Yeah, this does feel long overdue between you and I, especially
Right.
James. You and I go way back.
Right.
And it's we always have great exchanges on social media, just private text and DMs because I'm, as James knows, I am a very emotional and fired up, passionate Padres fan, and if you follow me on X, especially during Padres season, it can get a little dicey with some overreactions to things, but that's part of the fun of being a sports fan. It makes me feel alive inside. Not that my 3 kids don't, but the being a sports fan, it's hard to replicate the raw emotions and feelings of being a sports fan, especially, as we all know, of an organization such as the San Diego Padres.
Yeah, well said, because this organization will take you on an emotional roller coaster. That is for sure. Folks, we are pleased to be joined by Dan Szymborski here today. Dan has the honor, or the dubious honor, of being our guest with the most amount of appearances on our show. This, I believe, is his 7th or 8th appearance on the show. He was our 2nd ever podcast appearance way back in 2016, which was 10 years ago, Dan, which is pretty amazing. Too bad we didn't invest in Bitcoin back then, but what's going on, Dan? How you doing?
I'm doing fine. Cold, but otherwise fine.
Yeah. Dan is back east in Baltimore, correct?
I'm from Baltimore. I'm in Ohio now, which is even a little bit colder than Baltimore. They're
Really?
very similar. Yeah.
What part of Ohio?
I am between Dayton and Cincinnati, the most exciting part of the country.
Okay, my daughter's back east going to school in Hiram, which is east of Cleveland, southeast of Cleveland.
Yeah, I'm in disturbing chilly country. I don't like the Cincinnati chili, and I've been here since 2007, and I'm still kind
Not
of
a Skyline
terrified.
fan, I take it.
I am not. Chili should not taste like pumpkin pie filling. It's just kind of my feeling about it. There's nothing really Texan about me, but I like a bowl of Texas Red. That's
Okay.
what chili is.
Okay. For those that don't know, Dan is the ZiPS creator and caretaker of the ZiPS entity or machine, or however you want to refer to it as. And the Padres projections just came out last week, correct, Dan?
That is correct.
Awesome. For those that don't know, give us a little bit about the ZiPS projections and how those are accumulated, and basically for the dummies out there that aren't aware of baseball analytics, if you will.
Well, ZiPS projections are computer-based projections, pretty complicated algorithms at this point, but the basic idea is that ZiPS looks at a player and it establishes a baseline expectation based on the player's history, their characteristics, StatCast data, everything that's available data-wise. It compares it to every other player in history, or at least minor leaguers going back to 1950. I don't have translations before 1950. It compares that baseline to every other baseline it has, which is about 140,000 different player lines, for pictures, 170,000 hitter lines. And then it uses a comparable cohort of players so that similar players are compared to each other, and just kind of gets an idea of where they're going as kind of a group, and tries to, peer through the fog a little. It's not all that different from how hurricanes are forecast. Of course, very different things, but they use data and they have models, and they assemble an ensemble model. And, you had that little cone of ignorance that you see in the little maps whenever you have a hurricane forecast. The little cone that's like, the little tiny hurricane symbol. And then that cone that comes out. That's just the same thing for a player, but it's baseball instead of, destruction, which is a better thing, generally speaking.
Yeah, we'll go with those kind of cones for sure. And Dan, as a longtime admirer of you, this is my first time getting to talk to you, which is great. Most kids growing up, they dream of being firefighters or pilots or professional athletes. Ever since I watched Tony Gwynn, and I grew up in San Diego, grew up in Escondido, and grew up loving him, and then watching his Hall of Fame process, I wanted to be a Hall of Fame voter when I grew up, and still kind of do. Whenever I grow up, I'm extremely jealous of your opportunity that you are as a Hall of Fame voter, and it's always been a fascinating process for me, especially this time of year. And I always check in on folks' ballots. Not that I want to, rake them through the coals on X every time I disagree.
You can rake me through the coals. I'm used to getting raked through the coals. I don't mind being raked through the coals.
Quite opposite, in fact, Dan. I noticed on your ballot you had that note at the bottom that said that your personal objection to the limit of 10 slots because of the 12 that meet the Hall's historical standards based on your personal analysis. And I'm fascinated because some people think this is a bit of a lighter ballot or lighter class. So I'm curious, walk through that process with me a little bit on what meets your analysis and why those 12 players deserve it.
Well, one of the things about the Hall of Fame is that a lot of people, not necessarily you guys, had this idea that the average Hall of Famer is like Lefty Grove or Lou Gehrig. These are not the average Hall of Famers. The average Hall of Famers are a lot of guys like Red Ruffing, guys who are good for a long time and just get in the Hall of Fame, especially if they have, even some famous guys like Whitey Ford. If you actually look at his record, it's not that amazing compared to some of the elite pitchers in the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
But what it comes down to is that if you go through history, baseball, the players who have been represented in the Hall of Fame, in some seasons in the 30s, 25% of position player plate appearances are by Hall of Famers. And historically, 15% of plate appearances is fairly standard in baseball history, that the best 15% of players are in the Hall of Fame. And obviously that's pretty hard with more teams, but there's also baseball's drawing from a much deeper population than it used to be. When you talk about like 1930, 1940, baseball was, of course, a one race game, a one country game, and not even a whole country. Baseball was still a very regional sport still at that time. And now it's a huge business, people from all over the world. So baseball is even deeper than it ever has been before. And if you look at representation of the Hall of Fame, you see like there are a lot of years in recent years where fewer than 5% of plate appearances or innings pitched are by Hall of Famers. Even if you go back 20 years to guys who have generally already gone off the writer's ballot. Mm-hmm. So when people say, like Mark Burley isn't a Hall of Famer, he's in the Hall of Very Good, but you say, but compared to Hall of Famers, he's comparable to a lot of them. And then you get to the kind of idea that if people like Andy Pettitte, obviously there's some PED things wrapped into that, or Sabathia, who is in the Hall of Fame, or Burley or Cole Hamels, if they're not good Hall of Fame candidates, then how many good Hall of Fame candidates are there ever going to be again?
Definitely.
Pitchers are used very hard, but for very short innings relative to how they used to be. When everyone has to do max effort and throw 97 constantly in a sport where every batter can take you deep, which wasn't necessarily the case through most of history. It'd just be weird. I mean, what's the purpose of the Hall of Fame if it doesn't actually recognize the best of the era?
Yeah, for sure. How in the future do you think we're going to differentiate numbers like that? I mean, 300 wins used to be the magic number or whatever. Who's going to get to 300 wins at this point in the history?
Very few. It's from the ZiPS projections. There's no player right now who hasn't already passed 200 wins that is more likely projected to meet 200 wins than not.
For sure.
Garrett Cole had been slightly around 50, like right around 50%, but he's had some injury issues. Chris Sale has been kind of in that zone, but he's always been an injury case for the last 5-6 years, and was again last year. It might not be that we don't have 300 game winners, but we would not have 200 game winners. Now probably someone will do it in the end, but I think it's not great. I think when you look at a milestone like 300 wins or 200 wins, the question isn't what the number is, but what the number means. 300 wins is meaningful in a lot of history, and not as much as you think. There are not a lot of 300 game winners, and it's very limited towards the guys who were,
just longevity
era, and like the 60s, 70s, 80s guys. I mean, there's a huge part of history where there were no 300 game winners, even during baseball's golden era.
And they just pitched longer, right? I mean, look, Ferguson Jenkins pitched into his 40s. I mean, that's just how it is back then, right? I mean, like you say, max effort wasn't a thing. They went out there and tossed the ball every once in a while, and then did max effort. And change speeds in that nuance, if you will. Hitting was different back then, though.
Yeah. And so 300 wins means, generally speaking, one of the best pitchers of the time they pitched.
Yeah.
And 200 wins and other stats, of course, not just wins, but just on a general level, that still means one of the best pitchers of the era. Yeah. So we want to focus on the best pitchers of a generation, not necessarily the best statistics. And that sounds weird from a stat guy, but that's the thing with milestones is a lot of times they tell you a lot about the number itself more than the player. It tells you about the stat itself, the team they play for, the era they play for, because baseball is very different in different eras and players are used differently.
Right.
So I tend not to get obsessed with milestones. I care what do these numbers mean rather than what they are.
Right, and there's a guy that the Padres have a guy that's meeting some milestones. Is Manny Machado a Hall of Famer if he never plays another inning?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. He's been around now for a pretty long time, more than a decade, and he's been one of the best third basemen in baseball over that decade. And that in his Hall of Fame books, the Politics of Glory and the follow-up, whatever happened to the Hall of Fame, Bill James talked about like definitions of Hall of Famers. Like definition A Hall of Famer was arguably the best at their position or best player ever. B was best at their position. C was the best player at their position in the era. And you can make that case for Machado. You can make a case for other third basemen too, but you can't make it for Machado. And that's kind of why I'm in the obvious minority, but why I voted for David Wright. Because I consider Hall of Famers as either Hall of Famers based on a long career of very good performance, which is hard to do, or transcendent performance over a shorter period, kind of the Koufax case. So definitely. I wasn't a voter at that point, but I would have voted for Johan Santana to make the Hall of Fame, and I was aghast when he did not pass 5%. Because the thing is, you look at his career and Koufax's peak. Koufax's peak was better, but it wasn't so much better that you would say this guy is a Hall of Famer and this guy gets 5% in one and out.
Right.
I think he unfortunately was a little too old because I don't think Santana would have been 5%ed today.
Dan, let's move on to some projections for the 2026 Padres. Like I said, they just recently came out last week. Right off the bat, Randy Vasquez is something that caught my eye. ZiPS does not like Randy Vasquez very much. Padre fans are hopeful for a similar type year, if not better, from him in 2026. Can you give me a little bit about Vasquez and why exactly ZiPS is kind of bullish on him?
Well, one of the things with Vasquez is it's very hard in today's game to be successful long term with a strikeout rate of 5 point something per 9 innings. That's really hard. Knuckleball pitchers can do it, but on some level, you have to get these guys to swing and miss. Because when you don't, that means they're making contact. And unless you're unbelievably good at inducing weak contact, which is a hard thing to do against a modern major league hitter, there's just a lot of downside risk. And you really need kind of a cheat code, I guess, in a way, like the knuckleball or Tyler Rogers, who's basically the only submariner who doesn't have massive platoon splits. Because generally speaking, the submarine sidearm guys tend to have really big platoon splits because they usually they kill same batter. They kill them when they have the platoon advantage. They kill those guys with their sliders usually. And Rogers can too, but he has that sinker that actually allows him to get lefties out. And that's kind of his cheat code in a way. And I'm not sure I can say the same thing about Randy Vasquez. I mean, there are things to like about him as a pitcher. He does have a wide repertoire of pitches. So he does have different tools. I'm just not sure he has that cheat code to really cheat things out. Fair. One of the reasons he was successful, I mean, he allowed a batting average on balls in play last year of 261. That's really hard to maintain long term, even if you're good at it. So there is some risk there with Vasquez.
Yeah, and that's most Padres fans aren't kidding themselves, and they understand that there is a time bomb, as it were, with Randy Vasquez.
Yeah. They're going to be doing some dumpster diving in February and March and picking up some players on low AAVs for this year. I mean, that's that's just how they're going to do it. And hopefully they do better than last year in picking up Hayward and Joe and Gurriel and Maldonado, because that was a extreme dumpster diving right there. It's a fine line at this point when it's so late heading into the offseason and heading into the spring that it comes down to major league evaluation, right? I mean, it's you got to be able to pick up players that are that are potentially going to have a bounce back year, hopefully, right?
Yeah, I like when teams use the spring aggressively to invite interesting pitchers or hitters that don't really have a role or a purpose, and see what you can do with them. I'm the believer in just spring training craziness. Try anything in the spring, because I mean those games don't actually matter. Last year, my crazy spring training thing is, as long as the Tigers were paying Javier Baez and he has a strong arm, I would have just stuck him on the mound to see what happens. Just who knows? They have been some interesting conversions, like Matt Bush.
Right. So somewhere Joey Gallo is out there throwing off a mound, right?
Yeah, I mean that kind of thing is fun. Try players at new positions. I mean, that's kind of how the Dodgers got Mookie Betts back at shortstop. He was a not very well regarded second baseman as a prospect a decade ago. Yeah. But you got to do crazy things sometimes, because as long as it doesn't cost you anything, like when Jose Canseco hurt his arm, it's worth. I don't know. I think back of the Simpsons episode, Trash of the Titans. Was that the one where he was the garbage man with Steve Martin?
Yes.
And he said crazy promises were the key.
Right.
Crazy. That would be me as a GM. Crazy promises are the key.
Yeah, sure. For sure. Why not? Just try it out. Why not? Stranger things have happened, right? You never know.
Hey, I'd bring Barry Bonds to spring training just to see if he can still hit.
Yeah, it put butts in the seats, right? It would put media in the locker room. That's for sure.
I would absolutely do that. Unfortunately, not now, but I would have kept bringing back Ricky Henderson over and over again, because
the Padres did that.
But that's the thing about Ricky, is he loved baseball. He kept playing baseball even after teams stopped calling him. I mean, he played in the Atlantic League.
He played for the San Diego Surf Dogs out here in Independent League in San Diego.
Yeah, he still got on base then, as like he was nearly 50 at that point in the Golden League.
Right.
So I'm still bummed we lost Ricky.
Yeah, it's been a
year already. But it's.
Well, let's
now I'm sad. I've made myself sad, and it's somehow.
Well, let's cheer you up here. Let's cheer you up. So I'm really curious on your process, Dan, with overseas imports such as Sungmoon Song, and how the Padres, not exactly dumpster diving there. No. They're pretty excited about that addition. How does ZiPS treat guys coming from KBO and such? And because I see he's projected for an 84 OPS plus, 238 average. So on the lower side offensively, certainly there's a jump there. How does ZiPS process that transition?
Well, the good thing is at this point, we have a lot of players who have gone back and forth from Korea, Japan to the majors or the minors, because you can kind of use that data also. So there's a pretty good history of it. Generally speaking, the top talent in Japan or Korea can play well in Major League Baseball, same as Cuba. What's different among those leagues is that the depth is less. You don't have like the 50th guy in Japan isn't as good as, say, the 50th guy in the minors. Yeah. ZiPS generally translates. It's not like a 1-for-1, because some things translate better. Like pitchers who are more strikeout approaching, like Darvish in Japan, tend to get better translations coming over to the majors than some of the more controlled type pitchers in Japan. Generally speaking, Japan is between AAA and the majors in relative level of play, while the Korean Baseball Organization tends to be between AAA and AA. So obviously there are larger error bars, because it's a big cultural change. The sports are played differently there. While NPB's approach has started becoming more and more like MLB, is just natural, because there's so much interchange. They're still different sports. They still, especially in Korea, they still value putting the ball in play more than a major league team does. And sometimes approaches can be different. And so sometimes we've had some guys really just bomb in the US because you really kind of have to change that approach. Because major league pitchers, I think the scary thing for a player coming over isn't that there's some great ones. It's that there are so many guys who can throw 96, 97 or throw 91 mile per hour sliders these days, which was, harder than some of the fastballs when you go 40 years ago. And so there's a lot of pitches that you really just don't want to have a hope with sometimes. So that's why you see a lot of guys just walk away from at bats without making a swing because they never got the opportunity and it just didn't happen because of their approach at the plate. It could be a very different game, but I think over time it'll become more and more homogenous.
Yeah, no, the game is definitely changing. It's amazing when you reach like my age, or I don't want to speak for you guys, but it's definitely a different ball game than what we remember as kids, and it's going to constantly progress and it's going to constantly change. People think that what the game is now is what it's always going to be, and we can't even envision what's going to happen in the future. Bunting might come back. There might be a guy bunting every single at bat and stealing 150 bases. I mean, you never really know. It's the game's evolving for sure. Let's move on to some more Padre pitchers. I was interested in ZiPS likes Garrett Hawkins, a young pitcher in the Padres system. Give me a little bit on that if you could. I know the projects him as a reliever. Give me a little bit on Garrett Hawkins if you could.
Well, on Garrett Hawkins, you look at him and he's one of those guys who could probably, contribute, especially as a reliever instantly. He does have some history as a starter, but I can't imagine that after Tommy John, they're necessarily going to put him back on the rotation immediately in the minors, or maybe they are considering that. But he does have a good fastball. I mean, command was always an issue, but it didn't really. It was much improved in the minors in 2025. So he looks like a guy who could really be pretty solid depth in the bullpen. And ZiPS wasn't crazy about the back of the bullpen, so there is space for someone like that to really surprise.
Interesting. Awesome.
Yeah, I know ZiPS still had him down for like 4 starts. I don't think that's actually going to happen, but who knows? Because there's a lot of relievers will a decade later go back to starting like Jordan Hicks did. Didn't work super great, but that is a possibility long term.
Yeah, the back end.
It was Tommy John surgery he had, wasn't it? It wasn't like the sheath, was it?
No,
it wasn't full on Tommy John.
Yeah, I believe it was.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm remembering right because again, my memory is not what it used to be 20 years ago.
Well, and I do want to address too. It's crazy we've gone this far into a Padres-centered podcast and not mentioned basically the superstar of the team, Fernando Tatis Jr. Well, yes, he is projected, unsurprisingly, to be the top offensive weapon on the team. It is pretty amazing, and to Padres fans, a little not troubling because he's still a fantastic player. But I went back to your ZiPS from 2022. And, we're talking projection of 297 average, 173 OPS plus 7.6 WAR. I know he was a shortstop back then, but and all of a sudden now, 3-4 years later, post suspension, post injuries and surgery, his projections now are 265 average, 125 OPS plus 4.9 WAR. How much of that is maybe the position change a little bit, and also, or not position change because it's been several years now, but obviously there's been a drop off from absolute supernova, should be MVP every year, to a very good defensive, really still an offensive weapon, all-star level hitter. Where's been that kind of drop off for Tatis according to ZiPS?
Well, the thing is about players is people underestimate the idea of a guy just peaking early. There are a lot of really great hitters that if you look at them, people will see like a hitter at age 21 who has like a 150 OPS plus and assume that they're going to continue to improve until age 27 and then decline from there. But frequently a lot of guys just are at their best at 21, 22. Everything was clicking for him at that point. That was pre-shoulder issues. And over time, there's a lot of accumulative injury. I'm not going to go into any PED stuff because I think that's kind of overrated when you talk about long-term trajectory. So the why is a little bit harder to gauge. But the what is still pretty good. And I think that even if you don't have him as he's not an 8 or 9 win, he's not Mike Trout. I mean, where he is still really good. I mean, he's turned out to be a fantastic defensive outfielder in a corner.
Yeah.
He has a lot of value. He's the best player on the team. And even without him really becoming the player like he was about to be in 2021, it's still a really good contract for the Padres. When you sign a guy at 22 to a 14-year contract, you actually have a chance of it not looking horrible at the end.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Yeah. He's still, an all-star, should get MVP votes level player. He just went from supernova, absolute MVP to a pretty good, might compete for MVP every once in a while kind of player.
Yeah. I mean, it's better than Jason Hayward, who also had a huge debut.
True. That's
and then became a fourth outfielder. So,
so
count your blessings.
It's true. Speaking of long contracts and commitments, I couldn't get you out of here without talking a little bit about Xander Bogaerts.
Yeah, I knew that was coming when I said there's a chance of it. When I said Tatis has a chance of a 14-year deal, not looking terrible at the end, I thought, I bet Xander Bogaerts is
Everyone knew who you were talking about there. Everyone knew that.
8 years left on the contract with Xander Bogaerts, paying him till he's 41, I believe.
He's gonna be pretty old, let's just say.
Yeah, well, yeah. As a Padre fan, I really shake my head over that contract and how it came about. They were going after Trey Turner, they were going after Aaron Judge, and then they decided to take the C prize, I guess. What can we expect from Xander Bogaerts moving forward? Is the bat ever gonna turn around? I mean, I know this machine isn't a crystal ball, but what are your thoughts, Dan?
Well, if one of the problems, of course, is that he was never a killer slugger. I think that the power days are probably behind him. I don't think he's going to hit 33 home runs again. But he does make good contact. He has improved plate discipline wise. He's become more selective, and he's still playing the position. He had a very good 2025 defensively.
Yes,
and he's actually probably a better defensive player than he was a decade ago, which is usually pretty weird for a guy in his early 30s as a shortstop. But he's just a more accomplished. He has, I don't know if it's his range, but you look his air numbers early on were quite high, especially that season they had him at third base a lot with the Red Sox.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you want him to be a superstar, I think that's probably unrealistic at this point.
Yeah.
But as a 105, 110 shortstop who can play the position, get on base decently, make good contact, I think that there's not really a lot to worry about the next few years. I do think when you look at his profile, though, that once his defense starts to slip, then things kind of get dicey because he doesn't really have the bat to play. You can't really make him your left fielder because he'd be probably one of the worst in the league offensively by the point when we talk 3 or 4 years down the road. So he's certainly not a problem now. The Padres have much bigger fish to fry, but the time always wins and time is coming for Bogaerts.
Yeah. Well said.
That's a very ominous message there. Time always.
Yeah, I was doing a nihilistic Arby's commercial.
Your headline.
Eat Arby's.
That'll be the headline of our show today. Dan, this was an absolute pleasure. We're out of time for today. I've always been a big fan. I love FanGraphs. Love what you do there. Appreciate you taking your time.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you, Dan. Nick, it's always great to talk to Dan. He's just so full of energy. It's awesome to talk to him. That was ominous right there, Dan, with the Bogaerts, but he's right. Time is coming for him. His value might be now, but the future is a little dicey for the shortstop.
Yeah, it's fair to wonder how much longer. He mentioned the defense. That might be his saving grace with staying at shortstop for the foreseeable future until the Padres get, another, prospect or acquisition up and running, or Francisco Lindor. But we don't need to talk about that right now. It's really hard because I try not to do the Eric Hosmer thing because it's a little apples and oranges because they're so different, from a defensive standpoint. But Padres fans, that's still a very real wound. In fact, isn't this the first year that Hosmer's not on the payroll? Is that right?
Yes. Yes, this is the first
so
year they are not paying Eric
the wound
Hosmer.
is finally healing, I guess, a little bit there. But I struggle to find where Bogaerts would fit once his defense does decline and he becomes less than a serviceable defensive shortstop because, like you said, that bat has been average at best.
Yeah. I mean, second base is where you think maybe, but he's still not going to be an offensive performer. Let's try to transition to the 2026 team and not get too gloomy right now because it will rack your mind when you think about the future of paying Xander Bogaerts for 8 years. It's scary. It is scary, and let's try to focus on the issues with this team now because, like Dan said, Xander's not necessarily a problem right now. They do have bigger fish to fry. In my opinion, they need depth in the bench. They need first base DH type of player, and they need another starting pitcher or two. I don't know what are your thoughts on what this team needs right now?
Yeah, I wrote an article a week or two ago about the bench, and right now I know that the projections are a little different with what FanGraphs has with the roster resource based on or versus what might actually happen. But right now they have the bench as Luis Campusano, Mason McCoy, Will Wagner, and Bryce Johnson. That's not going to cut it if the Padres have any delusions of grandeur of winning 90-plus games again. Now, I also mentioned in that, like, the lineup, if you just look at the starting lineup in a vacuum, Tatis, Merrill, Machado, Laureano, Sheets, Bogaerts, Cronenworth, Vermeen, and Song probably in there. That's a competitive lineup. Like, I'm okay with that lineup if you can, do the whole MLB The Show, turn injuries off thing and just have that be your lineup every single day, no questions asked, no depth needed, no anything. That's a very competitive lineup. But we all know that the depth is going to be needed, that the Padres need bench depth. And I gave a few options there. And, there's some guys out there that could really be serviceable and, like a Ty France or Willie Castro is a guy that I really would like in this ball club. Just the intense or the insane versatility and still produces with the bat. Seems like he'd be a good clubhouse guy. It's one of those, like, I almost wonder why it hasn't happened yet, just because it makes a ton of sense. I mean, I'm sure it's probably to do with the dollar signs, but Willie Castro of the Twins and then of the Cubs in that late season trade last year is a guy that I would really like if I could just plug in a guy that's available realistically into this bench and just the depth. Willie Castro is a guy I'd like.
Yeah, and that's the issue that I mainly see with this team is depth. They do need depth. They didn't necessarily gather depth last offseason, and they ended up making a series of trades that could come back to haunt them in the trades with Baltimore and the trade with the Royals. I mean, Kolek and Berger would have been very useful for this team. Sure, they acquired Freddie Fermin, who's going to be the team's starting catcher this year, or supposedly. But that's not a huge commodity. That's not a huge valuable catcher. That's something that probably could have been acquired in the winter prior to the season. Sending all those prospects to Baltimore for Laureano and renting O'Hearn for 1 year. Sure, you have Laureano this year, but he signed very inexpensively for Baltimore last season. That's something that the Padres could have done themselves, and they could have saved themselves Victor Figueroa, Boston Bateman, Hightower. I mean, they sent some pretty interesting prospects. I don't want to say that they're guaranteed for sure major leaguers or they're going to be all-stars because you don't know at their age, but Bateman was really throwing the ball well. Figueroa was getting on base, driving the ball effectively, left-handed power hitter. Hightower is a middle infielder that just kind of gets it, kind of is a baseball player, baseball lifer, if you will. You got to avoid making those trades unless you have to. And at this point, this is the time to gather those talented players. Bring in a right-handed option for Sheets. Bring in a left-handed option for Laureano. And then whoever's not starting that day is your bench. Give them the idea that they can platoon, that they can start 2-3 games out of the week, and get at bats for everyone and provide veterans on the bench that have a potential to excel and develop and surpass your idea of who they are, and that's what winning teams do at this point. And sadly, the Padres haven't adopted that philosophy. I know money has a lot to do with it, unfortunately, but I don't know, Nick. Now's the time where you need to be able to sign those Ty France, those Yoan Mocadas, like you wrote about, players like that maybe can have a productive 2026 year, that are highly motivated as well, because motivation in this game goes a long way.
And I will say, for some reason, Jose Miranda doesn't exist in some of these projections. I'm not sure why. Maybe
that's
yeah, I think that obviously best case scenario is that he turns into a type of Gavin Sheets, where he's kind of discarded, and the Padres give him a long runway in spring, and he kind of finds something. And if Jose Miranda turns into a viable bench option where it's 9,500 OPS plus, that kind of range, that could be immensely valuable with some of the positions he can play, and also just his experience. And I think, just kind of going back to 2025 with Laureano on that trade, I think we maybe look at that trade also a little different if Laureano doesn't break his finger and he does play in that wild card round, which ended up maybe costing them because they just could not get any runs across the plate. And if Laureano comes up with a couple big hits and they win that wild card round, that maybe that whole tenor of this offseason feels different.
For sure.
It's just as soon as I saw that shot of Laureano in the dugout with them looking at his finger, my heart just sank, because he turned out to be a huge piece down the stretch, and I think he could be a really big part of this offense in 26.
Definitely. And that's another reason why you have to have depth, because you never know when these injuries are going to happen. Looking at this roster right now, what happens if Xander Bogaerts goes down? Mason McCoy's your shortstop? I mean, you need to have depth. You need to have an emergency plan for every situation, because these are human beings. There are factors like injuries. There are a personal thing. Anything can happen with these guys. You have to be prepared. You have to do your due diligence to fill this roster out competently. And at this point, now's the time where they need to do that. Miranda's a perfect example of that. 27, coming off a bad year with Minnesota, but had some decent numbers a few years back. Put up numbers in the minor leagues. Someone who's highly motivated. At 27, this may be his last chance at a major league service time consistently. And if he's never going to put his best foot forward, now is the time. And that's how you have to fill this roster. I mean, Tristan McKenzie is another player who I'm intrigued about. Blake Hunt is another non-roster minor league addition that they are motivated. These guys they want to win. They want to play. They are here to compete, and you're going to get the best out of them. And ultimately, when you fill your roster with players like that on the bottom half, you're going to have success. So hopefully they can find some more guys like that.
And you bring up with McKenzie, the rotation, I think that's another concern. I think if they can make maybe two average moves on the bench for depth and another somewhat average move for another starter, this team will be competitive. I think so. I am not a huge JP Sears fan. You know this from our private chats. And just because he did not have, and I'm a big first impressions guy, just in my personal life. And JP Sears, I'm sure he's a nice man, but he made a terrible first impression on the baseball field. And it's going to be hard to unsee that. I know that they're working hard with him. Ruben Niebla is working his magic. If anyone can turn JP Sears into a serviceable starting pitcher, it's Ruben Niebla. So, and I know they're excited about some things there, but you got Michael King and Nick Pivetta, Joe Musgrove, the big three of this rotation for sure. And then Randy Vasquez, hopefully he doesn't turn too much into a pumpkin, but as we talked about with Dan, that is a very big possibility. JP Sears, and then McKenzie, trying to crack the team as well. And maybe who are some other, and Jagger Haynes we talked about too.
Matt Waldron is someone that where's Waldron. 2023 or 2024 Matt Waldron? Is he going to show up? That's someone who's intriguing, someone who brings a different look to the team with the knuckleball. I don't know what happened to him last year. I know he struggled, but who the hell would pitch well in the PCL in El Paso, right?
It's an absolute, you're on the moon pretty much in some of those leagues. Like Kyle Hart, who provided some good, filler reliever vibes, roles down the stretch.
Yeah.
Can he,
Yeah.
provide you with some more depth that, he didn't, same with JP Sears, didn't have some great outings as a left-handed pitcher, but maybe can provide some value with a full offseason with the team. Jackson Wolf is always a guy lingering too, but depth is an issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's Johnny Brito coming back from injury. There's Brian Hoeing coming back from injury. I'm not sure if either one's going to be able to even be competitive in the spring enough to ward a rotation spot. But obviously, this team needs help in the rotation. When Michael King and Joe Musgrove are counted on as your big three, you have some problems because neither one are durable at this point in their career. Yeah. Joe Musgrove's coming off Tommy John. Michael King's shoulder is still a concern for me. I've been quite vocal about the contract that he signed. I really do not like it for the Padres. I understand he's making a low AAV this year, but there's no insurance for the Padres in this contract. If Michael King has a Cy Young this coming season, he will opt out and he will test free agency. If Michael King injures himself or he has a subpar year, the Padres are on the hook the next 2 years at a exorbitant fee. So
yeah,
I just hope they did their homework. Yeah. I hope that they know that he is healthy. I hope that they can trust that he will be able to pitch. I really don't have a lot of faith in it. I really don't. That's a head scratcher to me. With a team that has financial difficulties moving forward, you just put yourself in a situation where you could be paying a pitcher the next 2 seasons and they're not necessarily pitching well. So kudos to Michael King and his representations, but Nick and I balance ourselves really well because I'm the Debbie Downer in the situation every single time, and Nick is the positive one. So I will.
I'm all over the place. Well, there is. I mean, obviously, Michael King has. When we've seen the ceiling. The ceiling is that wild card start he had against the Braves, and
definitely
one of the more. Like even now, that is like seared in my brain as one of the more dominant pitching performances I've ever watched, period. And so, if obviously that's not going to happen every time, but if you can harness that, get him 28 to 33 starts this year, and he gets on the shelf with a cranky shoulder for one stint, sure, I get it, but nothing long term would be great. Nick Pavetta's a dog, man. I love me some Nick Pavetta. He's a bit of a throwback, a little bit. I like him. And Musgrove, so it's a little House of Cardsy on the rotation side.
They're one major injury for those three to being like Chicken Little, the sky is falling. What are we gonna do? I mean,
even Dan called it fragile. Dan called his high 80s to 90 win projection to the Padres very fragile based on the depth of the rotation.
Yeah, and that's just how it is. You there's no sugarcoating it. It is what it is. Those three men are capable of being dominant, but you have to look at outside factors and part of being a general manager or part of developing these franchises that you have to kind of try to predict these things before they do, and you have to have an insurance policy, you have to have a plan B. You just have to in order to succeed, because you set your whole season up for certain aspirations and winning, and you can't let one player going down just ruin the whole thing. You have to have, it's next man up mentality. It's that football mentality, next man up, and you have to bring that up on the baseball roster, and that's just where we are. I would expect the Padres to address the pitching need soon. We've heard Freddie Peralta rumors. I've heard some rumors behind the doors of a few guys that they're interested in. You would have to think that they're gonna move someone in order to do that, though, right? I mean, talk to me about that, Nick. We're well aware of the financial difficulties with this team. They were supposedly in on Nolan Arenado, who would have been exorbitant as far as cost. But where's this team financially? Will they be able to add players without trading a Jake Cronenworth or God forbid, a Nick Pivetta?
Yeah, I think they're kind of bumping up on their ceiling on that with some of the constraints. Okay. I didn't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it's pretty darn close to like the threshold. I know that they're trying to. It's an ownership situation. They're trying to kind of steer clear of a huge undertaking there, and So I honestly would be pretty surprised if they make a big move without a Jake Cronenworth or, some sort of payroll shedding or payroll trading, swapping kind of thing. Because other than that, it's going to be tough to imagine them making some huge moves. Obviously, they're not going to be trading for Tarek Skubal. I think we can kind of rule that out. And but there's some guys out there that have low cost. I mean, you probably sell the farm if you're going after a cheaper, high upside like Hunter Green. That would be a really expensive move, but low cost. Same with like a Joe Ryan with the Twins, or Chris Bubic with the Royals. But I'd struggle to wrap my head around them probably making a bigger trade, taking on a lot of payroll now without making an exchange. Probably Cronenworth makes a lot of sense, but with some free agents too, it's going to be some dumpster diving and a lot of kind of border moves or high upside, flyers. But I would be shocked if they make another big move without also, ridding themselves of perhaps Jake Cronenworth.
Yeah, I mean, and it could be something as simple as moving Wandy Peralta or Yuki Matsui, who are around the $4 or $5 million mark for the coming season. If they move them, that's 1, 2, maybe 3 potential players that they could pick up for that type of salary, and that's their mentality right now. But it's going to come down to evaluation. You don't want to pick up guys that are on the tail end of their career. You want to pick up guys that maybe had a bad 2025 that are looking to rejuvenate themselves and that might still have something left in the tank. That's the philosophy that they're going to need to take. Like I mentioned, McKenzie, Hunt, God, what is his name? We just talked about him. Miranda at first base corner. That's the type of player that they're going to need to focus on. And hopefully you bring in 5, 6, 7 of those guys, 2, 3, 4 of them pan out. And that's just the law of averages. They're not all going to pan out, but some will rise, some will take their game to the next level and become legitimate major leaguers. And that's what we need at this point. I mean, Ty France signed last winter for $1 million and put up a gold glove and had a decent year. So they're out there. You just got to find them.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of guys that have just real quick, guys that had down years that maybe take a flyer on that aren't exactly ancient. A guy like German Marquez is a guy I've had my eye on for a little bit.
Yes.
I would take him probably over the back end of the Padres rotation right now.
Yes,
so he's still out there.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a guy who getting out of Colorado might just unlock something with him, and he's always been fairly durable. So at this point, you want durability. You want a veteran who's going to eat innings. And you and I behind closed doors have talked about Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer. Is that a fit for this team? Obviously, cost is going to be a lot for a name like that. But if they're able to eat innings late in the year and into the playoffs, they could provide a veteran presence, a bulldog mentality to this rotation. Anything can happen. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah,
Nick, and great show, great first interaction with us. Great having Dan on. I think we're good to go. Is there anything else you want to cover before we head out of here?
No, I will be down in spring training for a week. Looking forward to that in late February. Nice. So if you're Padres folks and you want to, bug me or come harass my family, we'll be at several spring training games in Peoria. So looking forward to the calendar turning. January stinks. Once it turns to February, I can taste it a little bit. So it's getting close.
Right. Yeah, it's coming. But we're about a month away from pitchers and catchers reporting. So it's getting crunch time for this Padre roster, and expect to see some moves in the coming weeks for sure.
Well, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. And thanks for listening to this East Village Times podcast. We will see you next time, whenever that may be, hopefully soon.